Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Catheta webinar. We're coming to you live on April 17th, 2024. For any NLC webinar first timers here today who aren't yet aware, Catheta means learning in Creek, and today we'll be learning about the home selling process for tribal members from Marie Bonville. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist at the Native Learning Center. We're also excited that you could be here with us today. If you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. Also displayed here is our copyright infringement law. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar presentation materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. So just a friendly reminder. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know how some of the features available work and how you can interact during today's webinar. So if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon of a hand with a plus sign. If you click on that icon, you could either raise your hand, you could agree, you could disagree, you could show some applause, you could show some laughter. You could even signal requests like asking the instructor to speak louder or maybe slow down, please. Now your screen should look similar to this graphic. To the bottom left, you'll see a pod that says Files. Here you'll find any handouts or appendix items included in today's presentation. You could download a copy for yourself by hovering over the item you want to download with your mouse, and then click the arrow pointing downwards to download and save it to your device. Marie has given permission for her presentation to be available for download, and this can be accessed right there in the Files pod. It's actually the first one that has the date with it. The second pod to the right, labeled Web Links, that's where you'll find our survey about today's webinar, along with the link to receive our weekly newsletter, connect with the Native Learning Center on LinkedIn, as well as any other links that you might see throughout today's presentation. And then all the way over to the right, we have the chat pod available. So this is how you'll communicate with the instructor and the NLC staff. If you have any questions during the presentation, we welcome you to send them in by using the chat box. Just type your message into the space that says type here and hit enter or click the up arrow icon button to submit. We do encourage class participation, so feel free to write in those questions or comments. And any kind of tech support problems you might encounter, you can submit that there as well. Know that most of the tech issues can be solved by just leaving and then rejoining the meeting room. But let's all get the chat box fired up now together. If you would please go ahead and type in your name, where you might be joining us from, your tribal affiliation, and the work or the role that you have in Indian country. Also, just one final note, you guys, if anybody is viewing today's webinar as a group, maybe you're sitting with your colleagues or a friend, if you could please just be sure to email me. I'm actually putting my email into the chat box right now. We do need to have accurate data for our records, so I just want to make sure that everybody is accounted for. All right, folks. That is all I have for the introduction. So with that, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's webinar instructor, Marie Bonville. And Marie, I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate the introduction, and I also appreciate the Native Learning Center for the opportunity to present today. It looks like we've got a few folks in the room putting things in the chat area. I will monitor the chat area. I certainly don't like talking for an hour and a half straight, so at times we will be using the chat area there. And I appreciate your feedback as well in terms of what selling a home in your community looks like, right? In Native communities, we've got several different ways in which land is valued in terms of appraisal and other things. So it'll be interesting to hear from different perspectives. So a little bit about me. My name is Marie Bonville, and I am the owner of Sunlight Armor Homes, which is a residential construction and remodeling company here in Atlanta, Georgia. I also have my real estate license in the state of Georgia. Prior to my time in real estate, I worked for the Native Learning Center as a director of training and technical assistance. Of course, we provide those sorts of trainings like the one you're attending today, and we work closely with EWONAP and other Native organizations that are driving the conversation about home ownership in Indian country, right? So for a long time, we've been talking about what it looks like to purchase a home. The home buying process is one in which is difficult for many tribal communities for a lot of reasons, primarily the lack of inventory, the lack of infrastructure, the need for investment in those items, as well as the education piece, right? Making sure that our tribal members are aware of how payment assistance works, what's the process look like, and how not to get taken advantage of, because there are folks that are out there to do just that. So I'm very cautious when I say that this is a conversation about selling what is the largest asset that our tribal members may have in their home, right? So we got to be careful with the language there. It's not that I want to advocate for the sale of the home as much as, how to know as a consumer when it's the right time to sell. What does that look like? Again, there could be, and we will talk about the reasons that people sell a home, what the motivation looks like, and what to look out for. So this is more of a consumer cautious question that we as housing practitioners should bring to the table. Of course, you don't want to do that in your home buyer workshop, so there's a time and a place for that. But I do think if we're trying to prepare our tribal members for success, we're talking about generational wealth in our communities. What does that look like? Why does a home carry such weight when it comes to generational wealth? Those are the kind of conversations we're going to have today. So, of course, we got to review the seller's why. Why does a person put their home up for sale? What conditions need to be prepared, right? What sort of routine home maintenance goes into, making the process easier, that's for sure. But also it protects the seller from those sorts of negotiating repairs with the buyer, right? So we're looking at it from two different angles here. Of course, we want our clients to maintain their investment. We want them to think about an annual maintenance routine. But we also want to make sure that they're not having to spend, extra monies when it's time to sell a home and have those required repairs put upon them. Conditions, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the housing market today, what it looks like. And we're also going to talk about seller responsibilities, right? Those repairs that I talked about earlier, and also seller concessions, right? You always hear the term buyers or sellers market. What does that mean exactly? And how does it affect the sale of a home? So what you may have missed is last week we talked about the home buying process. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that it's different depending on where you live in the country. Each housing market is hyper local. It depends. The housing prices themselves, adjust for for inventory, for economics, right? Jobs that are maybe becoming available or that are being taken away, right? So it all kind of depends. We talked about the home buying process on using several different options, whether that's Section 184, Native American Direct Loan, USDA, and their programming, and then, of course, the conventional home loans. And then we talked about protecting your investment briefly in that, when do you use a handyman versus a licensed professional, right? So if you missed that discussion, it's in the NLC archives. But, the housing market was a big one for me because I think sometimes we need to lay a good foundation. And the reason why the 2008 Great Recession, as it's called, is so important is because it set into place certain rules, regulations regarding housing, and the market itself. How we currently buy and sell homes has a lot to do with what didn't exist in 2008, right? We had a lot of folks lose their homes because they didn't have the proper education. A lot of practitioners in the housing market left the housing market because there was a lot of bank inconsistencies in terms of people who were ready for a home, whether or not they actually should have been in that home. So we try to do our best to educate our folks as to what it takes to be a solid home buyer, right? Through saving, budgeting, and spending habits, making sure they're paying attention to those things. But what does the future look like, right? They're inundated. Our clients are inundated with information, whether that's family, friends, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. There is definitely some undoing that we have to do as professionals to get them ready, right? Because they think they know what they saw online is basically how they think it goes, right? Or even worse, HGTV also doesn't help, right? They've got these perceptions that are out there um, that just aren't accurate, right? It would be nice if they could just uh, go online and sell their home, but in the case of tribal communities, the whole process is different. And again, going back to this conversation on generational wealth, according to a 2021 report by the Urban Institute, real estate accounts for 70% of all generational wealth in the United States, right? So, what does that mean? That means that for most families, this is going to be, and certainly in our case, the largest asset that they currently have. And this is what they're planning to use to support family in the future, or family and relatives in the future. And I have the newest statistic. This one here says as of April 2023, but currently the average or median sale of a home in the U.S. is $411,000. So just from last year to this year, you can 411 400, excuse me, 411, that's a mouthful, is a lot of money, right? It's just a lot. So I think that when we're talking about affordability, how to prepare folks for homeownership, it's important to note that, if we're trying to build generational wealth, we need to explain how do you tap into it? What does that look like? Um, so we're going to also go back to why home prices are where they are. They're on the high side for a couple different reasons. And depending on your tribal community, I see homes in the high 200s where they used to be in the, low to mid hundreds. So I think that part of that is, and that's for manufactured homes. That's not stick built. So here you can see the rise starting from about, there's been a steady rise since 1980, but I would say that we definitely saw a boom in 2000 going into 2008, which is when you start to see the market crash there. That's the first thing that I would highlight. But then from 2010 on, you see steady growth. Again, the industry recovering from the Great Recession. Now, why did it spike in 2020? Well, you had the pandemic. 2021, 2022, interest rates were very, very low, lowest being 2.29%. And because money was easy and cheap to borrow, it made it to where that created demand, right? You had the perfect storm in 2021. You had buyers who saw the benefit of staying put. You're right. Everyone's kind of has to stay shelter in place. Remember that term? So, you don't have a whole lot of inventory. People are staying in place. And then on top of that, you have all these buyers that want to be more stable. They want to get their own home. And they also have cheap money, right? If interest is the cost of borrowing money and money is cheap to borrow, then now's a good time to do it, right? So the perfect storm hit by March of 2021, and it made it to where affordability just shot up, right? The cost of homes rose because of supply and demand. So, what I like to tell my buyers now, and I know I'm backtracking a little, but this gives some perspective to the sellers when they're thinking about who would be interested in purchasing their home. What I like to tell my buyers is that if you look at the average interest rates over time, you'll see that the highest on record was in 1980, and maybe 82 being the highest. And then you'll see that, for the most part, it hovers anywhere between the 5 and 7, like that's the average. Sometimes it goes up to 8, but for the most part, you'll see 5 and 6s until 2008, when the market crashed. Once the market crashed, you saw, of course, the economy wasn't doing so hot, and you saw that interest rates lowered, and they stayed relatively low for all of the 2010s. And then we get to 2020, where again, you saw that dip into 2021 because of the pandemic. So I would say that it's definitely something where that's an outlier. You're probably never going to see 2.9 again on average within the year. But that, because again, this was specific to um, a, a point in time. I think on in general, buyers who try to wait the market out, you can always, what we like to say is date the rate. You could always marry the home and date the rate, right? You can go back and refinance the home once interest rates go down. Of course, the interest rate is going to affect affordability. This isn't to say that your payments won't be more as a result of interest, but it's just something to think about, right? When people are on the fence and they say, well, interest rates are high. Well, right now they're on average, right? It's not obscene amount of interest. We're not seeing 18% like we saw in the 80s. Um, but again, the need to purchase a home, there's a lot of factors, and of course, interest is one of those. So we want to make sure we talk about the higher interest rates that are out there. Um, Also, understanding the relationship between inflation and interest rates can also be helpful. So if I go just a step back real quick, I can tell you that when inflation is high, the Federal Reserve does what they can to limit the flow of monies and um, lower interest rates. So that's kind of what's going on right now. So this chart, if I were to put a chart when it comes to interest rates over it, you'll see that they are connected in terms of how high interest rates go. It's totally based on how much inflation is going on in the market. But then there are other factors that play here. Lack of inventory, as I mentioned before, building costs. We all saw in 2021, 22, the cost of building a home increased as well. Some of my clients are out of South Dakota, and just manufactured homes in those areas. Again, going back to them being that 120 to 150 range, are now costing 200 plus, and then the travel, right, of those manufactured homes, those costs have increased as well. So there is that. But what other housing cost increase can you think of that we should probably mention here? So you can go ahead and put them in the chat area. But what other housing concerns or worries that do people have with this current market? And let's just put it all on the table as far as what some of the other concerns might be. Let's see, I've got Barbara, Dawn, Erica, Janice, Jody, and Rhonda. So go ahead and put in the chat area, what are some of the concerns that a buyer or seller might have in this current market? And forgive me, I have to slide down here, and my area is kind of slow. Let's see. Affordable inventory, right? So it's not just that there aren't enough homes or lack of inventory, but they're not those that aren't even affordable. And affordable is just that the term that, if you're new to housing, affordable means that based on the person's budget, that they can afford to qualify for a home loan. In some cases, we're not seeing people being eligible for the homes that are in that 300 to 350 range, right? So it could be that it's not affordable for the economy that you're in. Let's see, the lack of decent or affordable housing, of course, safe, sound, and sanitary, right? What we're finding is those homes that are on the market that are that are affordable need a lot of work, right? So cost of building materials, that's another one. Of course, interest rates are affecting folks. We don't have nearly as many buyers as we had a couple years ago, but we still have the same shortage in regards to housing, right? So does that mean it's still a seller's market? yeah, it is still a seller's market. Even though interest rates are higher, many people still are staying put. We'd have half as many houses available um, as we did during or prior to the pandemic. And then Barbara says qualification, people's credit scores. That's a big one. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing up credit, because I don't have it here, but the 1 in 3 Americans, I read it the other day, 1 in 3 Americans have amassed credit card debt after the pandemic. So folks that didn't have a balance now have a balance. And the percentages regarding those that have a balance of 20 or higher, it was just insane to me. But what's happening is people are relying on credit to fight inflation, right? When the cost of your goods and services are more than they were the year before, and your pay hasn't increased, well, what will happen is you've got a gap. And to cover the spread, you're going to go ahead and use your credit card. So we are seeing credit card use on the rise, and that is and other loans. Some predatory in nature, and all of that is turning into not being able to qualify for a home loan either. So definitely, I think that, you know, when our clients are faced with all of these things, it's important to understand how real estate builds generational wealth. And again, I say that because, they may choose, if they are in a credit card debt sort of situation, there are, refinancing or financing options that work best to both save your home, keep your home, stay in your home, but allow for you to tap into that equity. So this is more of a consumer discussion. Regarding the tax breaks, of course, you can deduct your mortgage interest, and if you're fee simple, if you're off, if you're not on reservation, then of course, then the property taxes and other income, federal income, can be deducted. Um, Increased borrowing power. Of course, homeowners have access to more favorable interest rates on loans, such as home equity with your current lender, or even if you shopping around for a better interest rate, or HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. Increased savings. Homeowners on average are more likely to save money because they have a vested interest in maintaining the property. And then, of course, financial security. Of course, most of our clients are going to be in fixed rate homes, in which case the uh, interest rates itself aren't going to be affected. Whatever they locked in their interest rate at when they purchase their home is pretty much what stays until for the life of the loan, the 30-year loan. Um, and so if there is a financial hardship of any sort, they can weather that storm. I myself, I purchased I purchased a home February of 2007, and by August of 2008 I was underwater, right? I owed more than the home was worth. And so I had to weather that storm until we saw the light, until the mortgage or the housing industry itself was brought back to life, right? So what did that mean? I had to maybe make I had to make I moved my family in. I needed renters. I needed to have family and friends come in and help me with this mortgage payment because I couldn't afford it on my own, right? So we do what we have to do in that regard. But I do think that in that way, if I had been renting during that period, I may have had to either move back home with my parents, or I would have had to um, sell the home, right? And I was lucky. I was one of the few back in 2008 that was able to keep my home, and of course, it benefited me several years. I think I sold it in 2020 or 2021, and so as you can imagine, based on what we've just discussed, it was to my benefit, and I had come through that. But it's not like HGTV, right? You don't see 3 homes and select one and make an offer and it get accepted right away. There is a process to selling your home, and it requires that even sellers, even our sellers, have to uh, understand a spending plan, make sure that they're saving, tracking, assessing, and taking action with their spending plan. I did a homeownership training the other day, and I want to say 99% of the class was getting e-statements. Well, that means that many of us aren't checking our e-statements. We are not checking our statements each month to see whether or not we stuck with the plan, if we're even using a plan to begin with. And a spending plan is just this fancy way of saying, I know where I tell my money where to go. I know where it went, right? So whether you just do that with apps, as you can see here, and no, this is not my bank account, but Bank of America and other banks now offer a lot of analytical evaluations through their apps that you should maybe look into for your clients, in that this could give them the breakdown of what they're spending each month, if they're not going to go and return back to, printing out bank statements. But there are reasons to sell, and we're going to talk about them now. But I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork as to, what we'd like to see all our clients, whether they're buying or selling, do. But now that you have some homeowners in your groups, maybe you can have a conversation about, well, what are the reasons to sell a home? What does it look like? Well, one, you might be wanting to size up or down, right? In the case of growing families, you need more space. And so you opt to get a larger home. In some cases, your empty nesters, your elders, folks that are interested in, reducing footprint. I know that that's a big thing that younger generations are really, why do do all the houses need to be 3 bedrooms, 2 baths? Like, what if I don't need that? Right. So I think that the tiny home nation is out there, and they're kind of vocal about what they want to see in their communities. I think, you know, there's a if you have time, there's a in community development, there's a conversation on the competitive advantage, right? And there's a competitive advantage to any situation, even if it's not ideal. So, of course, in Indian country, we've got some uphill battles when it comes to home ownership and housing. But what's the competitive advantage, right? Of where we can have input into what sorts of housing is put on our reservations or in our communities. One competitive advantage that I see is that, you all will be able to, if you're able to get the resources or the financing for infrastructure and community development, look into what your community is needing, right? When you do your needs assessments and they're wanting that smaller footprint for a home, it means the building costs will be lower, and you'll get people to be homeowners. And it doesn't mean a 3 bedroom, 2 bath home. Maybe it's smaller, but it works for them, and it's building their asset, it's asset building at the same time. So anywho, back to regular scheduled content. But what about employment, right? Of course, a relocation when it comes to a job is what we normally hear about. But there are other reasons, career opportunities, right? Not physically because your job is moving, but maybe you found a job somewhere that you want to pursue. And so you've got to move for that reason. We have people that are moving from city to city, state to state, or even the country right now. So when this is the case, of course, that there's a whole host of things that need to happen. This is why a timeline, well, I'll talk about timeline and the moving process, is so important. They really have to have a plan in place because, of course, you don't want to be left homeless. Reasons to sell, of course, in this particular case, a lifestyle change. During the pandemic, we saw people moving from urban areas, heavily dense populated areas, to rural areas. My family's out in California, cashed out of homes that they had there, and they moved to rural communities in South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Colorado. Why? Because the homes were much cheaper, and they could still work from home. They could work anywhere, right? So that's one in which everyone kind of saw that happen in real time during the pandemic. From moving from suburban areas to rural areas, also too, sometimes you find bigger families wanting bigger homes. Well, you're just not going to find that in Denver, right? Or a place where it's densely populated. So you'll need to move out closer to certain schools that are, might be an issue, where you're wanting to move to more of like residential, planned communities with more housing. Also, we're finding that building has ramped up, since we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about construction and the lack of inventory. Building and those large big box builders that we know, are all throughout the country, they are also ramping up their building efforts to meet demand, right? So, reasons to sell: financial factors. Sometimes you just don't have the budget for it anymore, right? It could be that there's some sort of medical reason. It could be that you have debt that needs to be addressed. Sometimes you're starting a business. Sometimes there could be financial reasons, are valid, and there could be a million of them. But the reality is, you can tap into your equity without selling your home. We want to make sure we work so hard to get folks in homes that it hurts me to think that they would sell it just because they needed to get out of debt. I think that um, if we do a good job of giving them the information, then they'll come to us, if they ever get into that sort of situation. That's what I always advocate for, is that we still support our homeowners through education and training, and we let them know, when it's a good or important time to, communicate with a housing professional. So, um, but then upgrades, right? Sometimes it's not that you're wanting to leave your home. You love your home, but there's just certain things you can't get from your home. Back in the mid 2000s, everybody loves Joanna Gaines and Chip and Joe, right? From Fixer Upper. So the thing about them is they were all about open. And you can finish the sentence, put it in the chat area. What did they love that almost every single one of those shows had? The Barbara's gonna get the answer first, I think. Open concept. That is right. Key open concepts. What was another one? You could throw that in the chat. That one's it's an easy aesthetic, but it has to do shiplap. That is absolutely right. Both of those things, if a home didn't have it, then it was going to sit on the market for a little bit, because that's what everybody wants now, right? So sometimes this has to do with upgrades that you just can't get in your home, and you're going to need to make the change. Or when you do the math, it just doesn't. What is it now? The kids say the math isn't mathing, right? Your bathroom upgrade, your kitchen upgrade. And when you do the math on all those renovations, it makes more sense to just purchase another home, right? So that's a reason to sell. And then, of course, life events, right? We never want to think about the future sometimes, because it's just a lot. I sighed even as I said it. Well, I just think that, sometimes the future has you will get older, and as a result, you may not need or be able to maintain a home at the size that you have, or it could be that you want to move closer to family, right? Because now you'll have the support system necessary to help you. So I think that life events is another reason to have this conversation. Um, we're super thankful and excited for our clients to get their first home, and everyone takes a picture with the keys out front, and we just don't have the conversation about, well, what would that look like if you were to age in place? So to give you a new term, or hopefully you've come across it here, it's picking up steam, the idea of aging in place, which is just that you would outfit your home with the grab bars or the sorts of things that elders would need to be safe in their home. So but for some, that is a reason to sell. And then I think this is the last one that I have here, but market timing, right? Sometimes the market's just hot, and therefore inventory is low. You saw in 2000 and in 2007, right, prior to the Great Recession, things were going really great. And so, home prices were high. Same is true of 2020. 1 in 2022. 23, we saw kind of like a flat line, and 24, you're seeing a little bit of a dip, but it's still pretty high. and I'll kind of explain that here in a minute. But what's going on is that the market is still hot, right? Prices are high. Sellers may take advantage of the opportunity and maximize their profit. It may be a good time to sell. What I always ask my sellers is, where are you going to go, right? If it's logical, if it makes sense to, sell your home for monetary gain, that's fine as long as you have a plan in place, right? So I think that that's part of it. You want to make sure that they're weighing all their options here. And for some folks, yes, prices are hot, but if you're going to end up with a larger mortgage payment and you don't have those resources, then it may not be a good idea for you. Any questions about what we've talked about so far? It's kind of a lot in the last 30 minutes. But, if you have any questions, again, you can put them in the chat area. So kind of going back to the conversation about the housing market and understanding headlines, a seller should be able to understand headlines. So we talked about interest rates. We talked about the breakdown of how interest rates work. But let's talk about tracking certain trends like interest rates, unemployment, income growth, housing supply, economic growth, birth rates, government policy. All of those things determine why people buy and sell homes. So it's important that, that's kind of complicated and heavy. What they need to know is that housing is a market. And so, depending on the supply and demand, there will be need, right? So, right now, the forecasted age in population, this is what it looks like by 2050, right? And people age 75 and older will increase to almost 13% of the population. That's a lot, right? What does that look like for the housing that you all are thinking about developing in your communities? Again, the competitive advantage that you all have is that you can in real time see what this looks like, as your baby boomers start to age, and determine what sort of development is necessary. I know that, of course, sometimes you do these needs assessments and folks just automatically say we need more housing, but what sorts of housing? Would a multifamily complex serve best, right? Apartments, townhomes, and less single family homes, right? Taking up more space, and of course, infrastructure. So it's just something to think about. Here you can see the median age of home buyers has changed over time. So used to be that the first time home buyer was 29. Now the first time home buyer is 33. Now look at this other line here, that the dark green. Repeat buyers, meaning people who have purchased a home before. It used to be that they were 36, and now there's 56, right? So what does that mean? It means, again, going back to the age and where we see people going in the future. Many of our repeat buyers, they're going to be older. They're going to need the support because at that age and space, they're looking for, now what they're looking for, right? So your housing can, hopefully with your IHBG and your ICDBG funding and other newer options that are out there for folks to get. I know it's a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. One of them just put out a new native centric home ownership product. Between all the products for home loans, there's options, and so it may not be a single family home. Freddie Mac, yes, thank you. So now looking at production, right? In Native communities, we've always had this kind of gap, but in general, there's a gap that's taking place all throughout the country in regards to housing production and where we are with the population growth, right? So there's a huge gap. You can see, where's my little, if I can find the little pen, I'll show you. So right in here, you can see that is a huge gap when it comes to production and need. And now we're in a place where our need has surpassed production, and builders and building groups are trying to keep up. Another factor that we didn't mention before, but it's worth reviewing, is the fact that skilled laborers also becoming a problem, right? Folks are getting older and not returning to the workforce when it comes to your skilled laborers, your plumbers, electricians, etc., framers, all of the things that are necessary to build a home. So that's something to note. Here, we're talking about the new homes constructed that are below 1,400 square feet, right? So the average home in the US, it's getting smaller, but we want it to kind of get smaller than that, right? So that they could be more affordable. Okay, and we talked about the average sales price rising. Again, as of 2024, it's $411,000. So selling your home in 2020, 2021, or 2022, you saw bidding wars, right? Multiple people wanting to put an offer in on a home. And you also saw them driving up the price, right? Because one would get list price, right? That's the price that the seller listed their home for. And then offers would go from there. The idea that you could put in an offer under list price was unheard of. You for sure wouldn't get accepted. So in 2024, it's a little trickier, right? So what's going on? Current mortgage rates are higher, causing the cooling of a seller market, but it's still a seller market. There's a slight drop in home prices, but choosing a time to sell is the most important thing, because again, um, if you're navigating having to leave, let's say for relocation, well, when does your new job want you there? What does that process look like? Right now, we're in the spring market, and so spring and fall are usually the times when people put their homes on a market. It's just in the case of South Dakota, think about the winter months and how harsh they can be. You really wouldn't want to put your home up for sale during those months, because you're trying to attract the most buyers, right? Summer sees fewer buyers, typically because kids are out of school, families are navigating that environment. And of course, if you're trying to move, it'd be hot. Throughout most of the country, we're seeing harsher winters and harsher summers. And so the spring and fall seem to be the most conducive to homeownership movement that we see in the economy. But of course, it's a personal decision as to what you would do to prepare yourself. So I'm going to give you some just tips for preparing your home for sale. Of course, we want to make necessary repairs ahead of time. It's important to know that the seller has to disclose what the seller knows about the home. So if you know you have a leak and someone's trying to purchase the home, and I have to speak in general terms because each state has its own licensing, has its own rules and regulations that real estate agents have to follow, or even HUD housing counselors, right? They're going to know much more about your specific area. So I would encourage you to connect with a real estate professional in your area so that they can assist you with these sorts of questions. But in general, a seller has to disclose what they know about the property. So if there's damage that needs to be repaired, they should disclose it. Of course, you don't know what you don't know, right? If you're not behind the wall, there's no breaking it open to find out. So if you don't know there's a leak, then you don't know there's a leak. And that can't be disclosed. Other things that they'll disclose is, okay, maybe the client or the seller put on a new roof. Maybe they changed the HVAC system. Maybe they changed the windows out, right, to make them more energy efficient. All great things, updates that the buyers would be more than happy to hear about. Those things you would want to make sure they're jotted down, they're written down somewhere because you could use it later. So one of the things we ask that our current homeowners do is each year they just make a running list of all the things they're doing to their home, that they updated their home. Maybe they put in some new a newer HVAC unit, or they put in a new tankless water heater, things like that. Um, that could be of benefit to them, because you kind of forget all the things that you do over time, right? To your home, you're fixing it for yourself and for your family. You don't think about what it might cost you, but it's good to have. Also, too, when you're looking at it from a insurance claim perspective, sometimes the insurance company wants to have this information, and so you might as well just start, pick a time of year to just note all the things you've done to your home since you moved in, and what those costs associated with them are. Um, of course, you determine an asking price or a list price. People use different terms for it, but essentially, you're just saying, along with your real estate agent, well, what is my home worth, right? And that's a tricky one, right? Because people tend to value their home higher than maybe the market, just because of the sentimental value. That's why using a real estate agent is a helpful part of this. Zillow, realtor.com, all those third party groups, not so much. When you go on those websites and you look up valuations, they're usually off, because they're not paying attention to the local market. There's a lot going on there that changes that. And I will also protect my clients from just being inundated with solicitations. Once you go on those sites, Zillow, Trulia, just third party real estate um, information areas, you tend to get solicited by loan officers and real estate agents, and everyone in between. So I would say, unless when they're serious about looking these sorts of things up, that they just speak with, you can provide a list of trusted real estate agents in your area and give them that to work off of. And most agents are happy to build a relationship and send them reports regarding what their home is worth. And I'm also careful to say real estate agent and not a realtor. I will explain the difference. But in every state, you have to be licensed to help or assist folks with purchasing and or selling a home, and that is any real estate agent. A realtor is a member of the not like an association of realtors. It's a trade group, so it doesn't actually mean what people think it means. Being a realtor means, yes, you hold yourself to a higher standard. I am a realtor in the state of Georgia, so I am a part of the association. But a realtor has a responsibility to the association as well. Um, Another thing I would say is that an agent has a responsibility to either a seller or a buyer, never both, right? So representation is important when it comes to selling your home. Um, because sometimes buyers will think, oh, well, I'll just work with the seller's agent. Well, the seller's agent represents the seller. They don't represent you. So they, not that, will they go out of their way to ensure you have a smooth transaction? Sure. But as far as who they represent the seller. So if they can increase the seller's um, price, if they can get the seller what the seller wanted, then that's what they're going to do, because that's what their responsibility is. Similar to board members, there's a fiduciary responsibility that agents have to whoever has retained their service. So that's just how that works. A lot of people don't realize that relationship is there. So sometimes they might say, okay, we got to take the personal items out of your home. And by personal, I just mean pictures and things like that. We want it to be a vision. We want the buyers to be able to see themselves in your home and not see you in their home. So sometimes we'll ask that you take down your personal pictures. Of course, we want to protect it from a privacy perspective, right? These may be strangers walking through your home, in which case you don't want to have bills and or private information, social security numbers, all their personal stuff. Everybody's got one. Everybody's got a junk drawer where they throw this stuff in. Try to protect it and even put it somewhere safer than that, because when you're doing a showing in a home, even though they might have an agent with them, that doesn't always mean they stay in the same place, right? The buyers might go into the kitchen, the agent is in the living room. um So to help facilitate the sale of your home, those are the sorts of things that I would recommend is that they just try to keep it neat, clean, and void of personal items. Um, One of the things I'm going to show you real quick is a video regarding the National Association of Realtors because it's pretty timely discussion that we're having. So bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and take us to this video. All righty.
Seismic shift coming in the nation's real estate market. A landmark settlement could change how homes are bought and sold and keep more money in your bank account. CBS's Elise Preston has the details. Elise?
Nancy, it's being called a major turning point in real estate sales. Buyers and sellers potentially being able to negotiate commissions with their agents. It's a positive sign in a challenging market. The standard realtor commission could soon be going away.
Long term, this is a seismic shift in a stodgy old business called real estate.
The National Association of Realtors agreeing to pay $418 million in damages to settle a series of lawsuits alleging it conspired to boost agent commissions. Right now, the U.S. average commission rate is about 5 or 6%, one of the highest in the world. U.S. consumers pay about $100 billion in commissions each year, which could be reduced by 30%.
I think for sellers, you're going to negotiate with your agent to come up with a fee that is reasonable for you. For buyers, it's a game changer. You may decide you don't even want a realtor.
New Jersey-based broker Michael Latman says this is a radical shift for realtors.
Do you foresee brokers and agents leaving the business?
A year from now, we might see 10% or more fewer realtors. Brokers, I think, are going to need to step up their game in terms of what is their value proposition.
And with historically low inventory and higher mortgage rates, experts say it could take some time to see a drop in home prices.
Now, the settlement has one final hurdle to clear. It has to be approved by the courts, but the new rules could go into effect as early as July. Nancy?
Elise Preston, thank you.
Awesome. So that is one instance where we will see, hopefully, that the fees associated with buying and selling a home will go down. That should be helpful. The big argument with this particular issue was that right now sellers have the option. They've always had the option of paying for both the sales agent and the buyer's agent and the listing agent. So that's two fees that is included in the sale of the home. That really, folks are saying, well, sellers are saying, well, why did I have to pay for my buyer's agent? Like that buyer should have to pay for their own agent. And so that was the conversation surrounding this particular issue. But the end result, the most important part to this is that I do think that hopefully it'll help when it comes to the fees associated with it, because that's on a $400,000 home, that's $20,000 or more that could be alleviated. And again, I know that in some communities, they don't use agents at all. And so it just kind of depends on whether or not your community currently works with real estate agents, and if so, what it would look like moving forward. So the argument regarding negotiation of commissions is that you should negotiate those commission with the buyers should do that, and also the seller should do that as well. So again, a real estate agent versus a realtor, it's all broken down here. In which case, now you know the difference between a realtor and a real estate agent. Now, this came directly from NAR because I didn't want to speak for them, but they don't set the commissions. They've always been a negotiation or an option to negotiate, but the idea was this settlement would allow for people to move past that and clear up or clean up the situation, because we started to see copycat lawsuits all over the country, and it just seemed like that was the easiest way to squash that situation. So my thing is that with any real estate agent, you should interview them, as the article said, or not article, but the news piece said. You should evaluate the value of the agent. Like, what are they bringing? What's the value proposition? What do they bring to the table? You want to interview them, ask them questions, request referrals, right? You don't want to be their learning curve, especially if you're talking about a community very close to or near the reservation. There are some members that might be real estate agents as well. So I think that it's important for them to have a working understanding of how it works in your community. And they will ask you questions like the size of your home, number of bedrooms and baths. They'll do a tour usually. They'll check out the neighborhood, age of the home, garage, and any other amenities. They are beholden to fair housing laws, and so they cannot discriminate based on race, religion, or the seven protected classes. So that is something to note. But they review other things as well. They look at your needs, your dreams, your concerns, your questions, your finances, your timeline, and your life. Very, very important. Some will offer photography. Some will say that they do videos, staging, as I mentioned. Some will have staff that actually manage your transaction. Sometimes you'll go on websites and you'll see listing pages. Sometimes they just market on Zillow and Trulia. So again, not all real estate agents are created equal. They all have their value proposition. For you, it's about finding what works best for you, and of course, paying close attention to cost as a result, right? Because if you're offering drones and 3D imaging, or a virtual option for touring the home, it's going to come at a price, right? Nothing is free. So thinking about that as far as how they market your home, how do they get buyers to your home? What does that look like? Are you going to allow them to negotiate on your behalf? And then, of course, document management. So, maximizing your home's value. They may tell you, hey, this area needs work and we need you to fix certain things. But here's some of the percentages, right, of how much more you would be able to get if you were to fix it. So sometimes that's the case. How people price their home. You want to price your home. Price and market value have to be there, right? So as you see here in this little chart, where the two lines meet, that is the sweet spot, right? That's going to bring a high number of eyes to your property, so people can come and look at it because they see the value in it, right? They're looking at the listing price and they're saying, I see the value. But also the market plays into it, right? If there are 4 or 5 other houses in your neighborhood, why would your house sell faster than theirs, right? So price and value and market value have to meet in the middle. And I'll give you an example. So if a home is priced too high, well then length of time on the market, if the price is high, it's going to spend even more time on the market. Whereas if the price is low, it can also spend more time on the market, right? Because people are saying, what's wrong with it? We know what the home should be worth. So the middle point is where everything makes sense to both buyers and sellers. So here you can also see, what I like to say is we can either be in the market, in no man's land, or out of the market, right? So we don't want those first two. We definitely want to make sure that we're paying attention to what they call comps. So again, going back to my HGTV folks, of course, if you've ever seen HGTV and they talk about the value of a home, they tend to say the comps. They're talking about a comparative market analysis. They're saying based on a home very similar to the home that you have, this is what I think your home is worth. So they'll typically look at the last 3 homes sold in the last 30, 60, 90 days. They'll also look to see, like homes, meaning homes that look like yours, have the same number of bedrooms and baths, storage that have the same square footage, makeup, etc. because in some communities it can be really hard, right? I know that I have some folks where they purchased a home and right behind it a big huge subdivision showed up, right? So of course those homes are brand new. This particular person's home was built in the 80s or 90s, early 90s. So of course, that valuation is all off on Zillow because it's looking at comps and it's seeing the homes in that other subdivision, less than a mile away, right? So on paper, it makes sense, but when you think about it, it's probably best not to include those homes in the comparative analysis. So pricing the market right, pricing the home or listing the home in the right market is important. You know, when I talked about comps, this is what this looks like, right? It's your home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, new roof, updated kitchen, 1,500 square feet. And then you see a listing with similar features, except it has 1 bath, just sold. That's sold within 30 days, right? So it's relatively um, recent. And you'll see here that it's 1,750 square feet. So I'd be like, okay, well, it was a little bigger than yours. And then 120 days ago, well, yeah, we had one that was a 3.2, 1,500 square feet. So just like your home, but guess what? It was in disrepair. It needed a new roof. It needed some work done on the inside. Maybe it had older flooring. So these are the sorts of things that I would say, okay, let's adjust. Why do I bring this up? Because this is exactly what an appraiser is going to do. When they appraise your home, meaning does your list price and the appraisal price match up? It needs to. How do we make sure that happens? Well, we pay attention to those sorts of things between the market and your list price. As I said before, listing agent fees as low as 1%, as high as 6%, as the news mentioned. So how do you decide? Well, you have to do your research and interview agents to see what they're bringing to the table in order to make an informed decision. So the next step in the last 30 minutes is you've selected an agent, you've prepped your home, right? You've done the work of kind of cleaning out clutter, right? Nobody wants to walk through your garage if it's a hazard. So you want to make sure you clean up common spaces, areas where people would be walking through and touring the home. Once it's ready for market, once you have a number in mind, then you would what they call be going live, right? What does that look like to go live? It means that you've made the necessary repairs, updates, and recommendations by an agent. In the interior, you'll turn on all your lights, turn off ceiling plans, right? You'll clean and declutter, organize your visible spaces. You'll put away personal items, family photos, throw rugs and things that are on the floor. You want to remove them completely because you don't want anybody slipping or falling in your home. So you remove them all together. It's just a safety thing. Adjust furniture, pillows, blankets. Of course, we can't all have the Hobby Lobby or Marshall's look. You do the best you can with what you have. I try to not have my clients go out and buy things. They're in the process of selling. We want it to be that they're not spending unnecessarily. Add centerpieces for a polished look. Things you already have in your home. Clear off all countertops, in the kitchen and bathroom. This is a big one. So you really don't want to have anything on the counters. That studies have shown, that it just clutter makes it hard for buyers to make a decision. They just have to see through too much to make a decision. Oftentimes they won't stay in the home as long. So they've done studies where they take a home, they put clutter on the countertops, they show the home. Then a couple days later, they do the same thing, only this time they clear everything off and, they get offers on the home. So, it's important to know to not make it harder on yourself if you're interested in selling your home. And of course, protecting your private information, turn off computers, TV screens, hide wires, cables, remotes, things like that. In the exterior or outside your home, you want to cut your grass, blow off your driveway, Adding fresh mulch and pine straw is a good one. Just doing a little curb appeal. Closing your garage door, removing extra vehicles, trailers, things from the exterior on the driveway, removing trash cans and lawn equipment, clean and removing debris from the yard in general. If you have a patio or an outdoor area, you'll want to keep that clean too. I would find a place for your pets during showing, and especially during the photo session. But sometimes during the showing, just letting folks know ahead of time. Your agent will usually say like, "Hey, if you're going to have a pet that needs to be in a cage, you just want to limit liabilities, right? The opportunity for something to happen." Um, and then, of course, a professional photographer is recommended. Sure, everybody's got an iPhone, but those pictures, you can really tell a difference. I know maybe you've seen that when you go looking for homes on these sites like Zillow. I'm sure you've seen the home that just didn't look as nice as it should, because they didn't take professional photos. And that usually is a cost to the seller. There are photographers that specialize in real estate, and so they'll cost maybe $200, $300, and give you solid pictures. Or you can go fancy and do drone work and other things. Just depends on the market that you're in. So another thing about agents is that they definitely have a lot to pay attention to. In addition to the year built, the square footage, the number of beds and baths, they're also looking at things like days on market, right? How long has a home been on the market? So for sale by owner, sometimes people ask me like, do you need to use an agent? Can you just do it on your own? You can. But an agent will know, and I say agent, not realtor, so I'm not advocating for the NAR. I just know that on average, there's money being left on the table, because when you're selling it for yourself, sometimes you don't know what to look out for, what to ask, things like that. So that's just comment on for sale by owner. It is possible, but when you're accepting an offer, there are things to look for. And when you're not an agent, then you don't have that knowledge. So what does it look like to accept an offer? Someone is interested in purchasing your home. Well, a buyer has to have what's called due diligence. Purchasing a home is caveat emptor. That means that buyer beware, right? You buy it, it's yours. There's no take backs, there's no receipts for a house. Once you buy it and you sign for your mortgage, or even if you pay cash, it's yours and all the problems along with it. So to combat that, you have due diligence. It's a time period where a buyer will get a home inspected, and that can take anywhere from 3 to 7 days, sometimes longer depending on the market, sometimes shorter depending on the market. But once you're done with the home inspection, then you'll have what's called an appraisal period. That's where the bank is going to come out, right? The buyer's bank is going to come out and say, is this home worth what they want to pay? A bank will never lend you more than a home is worth. So it's in the best interest of the bank for them to send an appraiser, excuse me. Appraisers have to be licensed as well. They're licensed agents. Home inspectors are also licensed in the state that they work in. So real estate has, some partners, your home inspector, your appraisers. Real estate agents aren't really to communicate much with the appraisers. Again, going back to 2008, we've kind of keep an arm's length in the transaction, so that the appraiser does what he does and that we do what we do to make sure that there's no funny business going on, right? They can't say that the home is worth $300,000 if it's really not worth $300,000. Seller repairs, sometimes depending on the type of home loan that a buyer chooses, they may require repairs. FHA comes to mind. Sometimes VA or NADL when they send the appraiser out, the appraiser may come back with some required repairs, because of course we want to make sure that the home is safe, sound, and sanitary. And if there's something not functioning correctly, they may require the seller to fix it. This is why we say that, first and foremost, if you're interested in selling your home, You need to save for it because there are some costs associated with selling your home that you need to be aware of. Once a offer is accepted and you are going through the contracting process, of course, you'll have your home inspection. This is what the inspection looks like. It either says, and I want to say an inspection isn't, oh, your carpet needs to be replaced. An inspection is checking to see that there are no major repairs needed. And it looks at, your primary areas of concern, right? So it's looking at your windows, it's looking at your doors, it's looking at your roof, the foundation of the home to some extent. They're looking for cracks and things like that. They're looking for any sort of repair that would cost the buyer money and a whole lot of headaches. And what they'll ask is it acceptable? Is it marginal, meaning something that maybe a buyer can fix later? Sometimes they'll even recommend, they'll say, requires handyman or a DIY for the buyer, or it could mean a general contractor or a licensed professional needs to come out and look at it, right? So if it's defective, that's kind of the route they're taking, the condition itself, in the inspector's opinion, it's significant, it's serious, it's a serious safety concern, or it requires an expense to correct. And then not inspected, sometimes they can't do certain things. If the pitch on a roof is really high and they're not able to get up there, well, then they don't know if that pitch is leaking, right? Or it's not present, there's no issues found. So any of those things can happen. When you list your home, there's list price, there's offer price, and there's appraisal price. And they're not all the same. Your list price is what you as the seller, what you would want to see, right? So again, going back to why you should pay attention to the market, you choose a list price and nobody comes to see it, you don't get any offers. If you price it correctly, you should get an offer. But maybe that offer price is $5,000 below or above what you asked for, right? So there's list price, there's offer price. Then there's appraisal price. As I said before, a bank will never lend you more than a home is worth. So your appraisal price confirms the offer price and lets the buyer know that that the offer that they provided is sound and that the home is worth what they're paying. I have seen appraisals come back higher than the offer price. So there's nothing, and this goes back to what I was saying before about for sale by owners, is that you can list your price. If you don't know the market and you list your price too low, your home too low, and you get an offer for that number that you listed it for, even though it was low, well, then appraisal can come back higher and they can show where there's equity in the home, but you as the seller won't get that new price. That's just confirmation for the bank who's putting the money up for the buyer, letting them know that yes, in fact, the offer price is correct. So all of that to say, you don't want to leave money on the table. You want your appraisal price and your offer price to basically line up and match up. I would say no more than over by 5,000 or under by 5,000 would be ideal. Then you're not leaving any money on the table. So that's appraisal in a nutshell. Sometimes I get questions about appraisals on tribal trust lands or allotted lands, and it's not really any different. It's just we use the cost approach instead. So I talked about comparative analysis and what that means. I think here's a comparative analysis. Again, this is one in Georgia. So it gives you the subject property. That's the one here on the left, 37 Cedar Way. And then if you look, it's got 3 that it's evaluating. And it's plus or minusing elements based on what you see here. The cost approach is different. So on tribal trust land, because you don't maybe have homes for sale that often, what I would say is, okay, well, what did it cost to build this home? And I estimate how much it would cost based on the structure, the materials used, and I'd go with that number instead. So it's really not that hard to analyze a home on tribal trust land. Some folks say, oh, well, you're not able to do that because you don't have a market. People aren't really buying it or selling that often. You just use the cost approach. So title work, as we are working both with fee simple lands and also tribal trust land. The way it works with fee simple land, that the title itself, the title company, or sometimes an attorney's office, depending on where you live, what they're doing is they're checking the title to ensure that the person selling you the home is the person who should be selling you the home, right? And that there are no liens or any sort of issues with the property. Encumbrances is a big word that sometimes they'll use that just says that there's no sort of issues with this home being bought or sold. On tribal trust land, depending on your community, you may have, it's gotten a lot easier because most tribes have like a land management office or a they'll call it like land real estate office, realty office. But the goal is to have a working relationship with the BIA, who will issue the title status report, right? So they're the one, the TSR is basically functions as a deed in that it provides status as to who has the ability to buy and sell the home located on the property. And again, going back to some tribal communities will require notice, right? So you'll have to notify the real estate office or the land management office of your intent to sell the home. And in most cases, it's to family members. And so that is, you have to check with the policies and procedures within your tribe's land management office. But a moving plan is so important. You have to set the date to move out. Of course, you're under contract, so you and the buyer have come to an agreement as to when you would move. Typically, on fee simple land, a real estate transaction takes about 30 to 45 days. So that gives you an idea of, from the moment your offer is accepted, you usually have about 30 to 45 days before it's time for you to move. So also going back to evaluating costs to doing this, if you need a mover, then you're going to need to have a budget as well. And I know we always say, well, family and friends will come and help us. What I find is that, it's wishful thinking, that oftentimes they don't have the help they need. You're packing up a house. You don't realize how much stuff you amass in a home if you've been in it, for some, sometimes it's a year or more, and they're filled to the brim. But I would say, if you've been in your home for longer than 5 years, you should start now getting rid of things that you don't want. Donate what you feel is of value, and then sell or recycle those items. But you want to start packing, because once you're in the under contract stage, you don't have a whole lot of time. So planning is key on that front. Any questions so far about that? Closing itself, the purpose of a closing is to transfer ownership between seller and buyer. And so you hear it called settlement statements or financial or a closing day or closing statement. This all just means that the legal documents are settled, and you're doing this at the closing table. Prior to the pandemic, it used to be that buyer and seller used to have to sit down in a really stuffy room and sign all the documents together. And it was kind of awkward. Sometimes maybe the transaction didn't go as planned. And so sometimes there's some animosity between buyers and sellers. Nowadays, sometimes the seller can sign first, and then later the buyer will sign, or on a different day. So just kind of depends on where you're located and the way your title company or real estate transactions work. But pay close attention to the calendar for potential conflicts. Remember, you accepted the offer 30 days ago. Things happen, right? So set an appointment with your agent or with whomever's helping you with the process to make sure that the property itself, that you've done what you needed to do. I would advise a seller to be careful with leaving stuff behind. We're finding that a lot of sellers are saying, I don't really want that piano, it's heavy anyway, and they leave it. We are seeing buyers kind of say, I'm going to do a walkthrough the day before, and if I see something that that shouldn't be there, I may just not sign yet until the seller officially removes everything out of the home. So just something to think about. Also, if things are of sentimental value to you, in real estate, there's a term fixtures, which means typically your appliances, lighting, things that are attached to the home, but not the home itself. Some things may stay and some things may go. That needs to be discussed prior to closing, because we have had it happen where a buyer says, I thought, the fridge was staying. And the seller said, no, it was coming with me. So those are the sorts of things that agents also will play a part in making sure that everybody's on the same page. But if you're not going to work with an agent, then you need to be aware of that. So on closing day, the buyer will sign the necessary paperwork, and the seller will and pay the seller the agreed upon purchase price. Seller will sign over the deed to the property, receive the proceeds, and the buyer will officially own the home. Nowadays, folks do electronic transfers. It's not like you bring a check to closing or that. So on that note, I would say beware of emails, right? Make sure that in most cases they're using secured emails, and it's not or like portals, that you're not actually sending your account information through an email. I say that because we have had fraud happen, large fraud. Imagine a seller selling a home worth $500,000-$600,000 and the money's not in the account yet, right? So bad guys, they pay attention to keywords, and when they search things like closing, like selling, a home, then of course they're going to pay attention to those emails. And if all it takes is one person on, CC'd on something for a hacker to maybe get access to information that you don't want them to have. So just be careful with that, and know that fraud does happen in real estate when it comes to transferring from buyer to seller, and those funds that need to be electronically transferred. Things you need to make sure you have with you: a copy of your driver's license or a government issued ID, keys to the home, all the keys to the home. I advise my buyers to switch the locks prior to, so that's not something the seller should do. But if you do have keys to the home, then, and you want to be helpful, then you can bring that to the closing. Any garage fobs and things like that. Sales contract or wire information, as I said before, be careful with that. And then any other documents or that your closing agent or attorney or whoever's facilitating the transaction, that they need to have as well. We talked about the agreement that need to be signed between you, the buyer, the buyer's lender, and any other interested party. I say that because we are seeing residential remodeling companies in starting to come to the closing. Why is that? The seller was asked to fix something. The buyer requested it get fixed. The seller agreed, but the seller doesn't have the money to pay outright. So sometimes what happens is they may have the construction company or the remodeling company, whoever's going to fix it, the plumber, they may say, would you mind getting paid at closing? So now that means that the plumber is getting paid at closing along with the seller. So we are seeing more of that. I think this is a testimony to the people not budgeting for routine maintenance and repair, right? So try to avoid that by getting your homeowners to be, constantly thinking about routine maintenance and repair, whether they do it seasonally, based on the seasons, or they do it based on the manufactured warranty or whatever, of whatever appliance or whatever system of the home, right? So if you have a 20-year-old roof, it needs to be replaced. The useful life of that roof is probably no longer there. Things like that. What else? Review and sign the loan documents. Of course, that's going to be not as much for the seller as it is the buyer, but it's still documents that they need to sign. exchange of documents. So you'll have stuff that is important to keep and put in a safe place. Of course, you want your funds from the sale of your home, and then a settlement statement, which just breaks down the money itself, where everything went. And that's it. Congrats on selling your home. What about taxes? So if you're off reservation and there are county or municipality taxes, that could be something that you need to discuss with the title company to make sure that you're reimbursed, right? So typically you pay your county taxes, it's put in escrow, and you pay that for the year, which means that you're getting a credit for the amount that's owed. In regard to taxable income, right? And capital gains tax, right? Some people, this goes back to what I was saying about TikTok, is you get a lot of folks saying, well, do it this way or do it that way. As you see here at the bottom, I am not a tax professional, but when you sell your home, you may be responsible for paying taxes on any profit. Sometimes that's not the case when you put the proceeds into a new house, right? So if you're needing to trade up, right? Maybe you outgrew your home and you need a bigger home. Well, then in that case, the sale of your home, those proceeds will go towards your next home. You're not taxed on those funds if it's going towards another home. But again, those sorts of questions, you'd have to speak with your tax professional to be certain. And then don't forget, you've got to cancel your homeowner's insurance. It's not your house anymore. You got to cancel your utilities. Get them out of your name. Contact your bank, your credit card companies, your doctor's office, all the people that are so used to sending things to that address. Again, going back to purchasing another home with the monies that you receive from the sale of your home, there are, I forget the name now off the top of my head. It'll come to me. But the main thing with 180 days of selling your home is that sometimes you don't have to worry about that capital gains tax. I think that's what I was talking about earlier. Which is that, if you do it within 180 days, then it's not taxable, those proceeds. You may be able to use the proceeds of your sale of your home for other things like paying off debt, investing, saving for retirement. If you refinance a home, the process closing to contract is similar. The bank will send an appraiser out to come and appraise the home, and then closing typically happens at the home. The bank will send a representative. They'll come to your house with the information that I mentioned earlier, and then you'll sign and receive the equity from your home in the same exact way electronically, but it'll be done with you within your home. Now, this wasn't a conversation on refinance, so I don't have the slides to go with it. But in general, since we've got some time, if you choose to refinance your home, let's say you don't want to sell your home, but you want to tap into the equity of the home, there's a couple options. You can do what's called a cash out refinance, meaning taking some of the resources from your home in order to pay off debt or to remodel. I mean, there are rules with all these things, right? So I'll give you an example. If your home is worth $400,000 and you owe $200,000, well, then you have $200,000 in equity. Will a bank let you take all $200,000 out? No, they won't. Typically, it's a percentage of, and it's more than likely it's no more than 80% of the home they'll allow you to take out. Of course, they want to protect their investment. They don't want you to cash out all your money and then you have this inflated home in price. So they kind of just want to stay realistic with it and give you some cushion. They won't take all your equity out. The other thing is a home equity line of credit. And that just means that it acts similar to a credit card in that you only use what you need and you're only paying interest on what you use. So that's how that works. But sure, I could definitely do another webinar on other ways to tap into the equity. But this webinar in particular is about selling the home, right? So on closing day, make sure you're asked that you ask the right questions. What questions are right and what questions are wrong? All questions are right, right? I want you to be able to ask as many questions as you want, whether that's with the closing attorney or the closing agents. Be prepared to move out. Make sure you have all your stuff and be patient. Closing day can take time. Sometimes closing dates change. So having a plan A, B, and C, not a bad idea. Here's a little home selling checklist for you just to kind of make it easy. Make your renovations and repairs, find a listing agent, figure out what your home is worth, declutter, stage your space, gather your listing description, your photos. I like to ask my clients, what do you love about your home, right? Everybody's always read those stale kind of AI written sort of listing descriptions, but I like the ones when it has some information about what they love about the home, right? What that will mean more to me, I think, as a buyer than if they just use, the standard stuff. Of course, you might be in a market where your listing agent may need to do a showing or an open house. So just be mindful of that, and they will advise you as to what to do in that environment, because open houses can be a bit tricky. You never want the homeowner there, and you also get like nosy neighbors that come over and pay attention to these things. But so again, this checklist is going to be here for you to use. But yeah, other than that, it's been a pleasure working with you all through this process and getting you to the closing table. Hopefully you enjoyed learning about the process of selling a home, and I'll see, I may be back with how to tap into your equity of a home as well. But that is it for today. I appreciate you all. If you have any questions, I will be in the room a little longer and answer them in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Marie. This was a fantastic presentation. I learned so much going through this before the webinar. I learned even more hearing you talk through it. This is amazing. Remember, guys, Marie did give permission to share her slides. So make sure that you are downloading a copy of the PDF, because I know this was, jam-packed with information. So you're going to want to go back and read through a lot of this stuff because she provided so much detail. So just make sure you're taking advantage of that files pod and you are downloading the slides. We hope we can see you back for our next webinar. That's going to be on April 18th, which is tomorrow. This one is one of our human resources ones about setting priorities and delegating duties to your tribal department staff from Lisa I. Perez. Registration is free as always. Feel free to access this and any other recorded webinars online on our website, nativelearningcenter.com. There's a Cathedra webinars tab featuring a recorded webinars section. So you can click on any of the webinars that we've done for about the past 2 years. So feel free to view those, share them with your friends and colleagues. And please also check out our upcoming events posted to our various social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an in-house produced podcast titled the Hopathanga Native American Podcast, where we discuss more focused topics within Native American housing and self-determination. You guys can listen to that on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And you could even view the video recordings with our guests on our YouTube channel. All right, guys, I'm going to launch that feedback survey for you one more time. If you guys could take a minute to fill that in. Helps us know what is going well, what we can improve upon, and be as candid as you want because it is an anonymous survey. All right, guys, but thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again, Marie, for another incredible presentation. I definitely want to follow up on your idea, and we can schedule the other webinar mentioned later on. That is a great idea. And with that, I'm going to say good afternoon to everybody, and we hope to connect with you again real soon. I'm going to close out the webinar.